question for you, and the difference between being state-sponsored, etc. But and I didn't even get to this because you know, the segment was going on long and it got contentious. But he made a good point in the pre-interviews that we did with him, and that is this: Jefferson owned slaves. Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. Third president of the United States, and there is a monument to him in the capital city of the United States. No one ever asked for that to come down. Is it equal?
Is it equal? All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is where the debate is going, I'm afraid. Joining us on the Malzberg panel, Tom Borelli, Senior Fellow at FreedomWorks, FreedomWorks.org, and Jane Velez-Mitchell, founder of JaneUnchained.com, author of the New York Times bestseller, Exposed, The Secret Life of Jodi Arias. All right, so let me start with you, Tom. You know, the Confederate flag, all of a sudden, there's the urgency that it has to come down. And now you hear the talk. You hear how this is, and they're not alone over there in that soundbite. We've heard it from others, and we've heard it. I heard it 20 years ago. You know, all these slave owners, we got to take their names off schools and take their names off this. Now they want to do away with the monument. You know, the Jefferson Memorial. Where does this end?
Well, I'm not sure where it ends, but if they want to start with the Confederate flag, I think they really should start with former Senator Robert Byrd, who was actually former Senate Majority Leader, a Democrat, who was not only a member of the Klan, he was a Klan recruiter, the Grand Kleagle. So why don't we start history going more current and going after all the buildings and all the highways where Robert Byrd managed to get our funds to put his name on highway funds.
And Jane, Robert Byrd, by the way, who during a eulogy of Robert Byrd, Bill Clinton, who I think his wife is running for president, said the reason he joined the Klan was he wanted to win the election. So he excused that. And William Fulbright, we have Fulbright Scholarship, Fulbright this. He signed on to the Southern Manifesto. He was a segregationist. So where does it end?
Well, let's talk about where it starts. Okay, it starts with this flag. And this wasn't something that everybody in America simultaneously woke up this morning and said, let's get rid of the Confederate flag. There was a young man who was accused of executing 9 innocent people simply because they were black. And this man has been waving around the Confederate flag. So for anybody who is unclear about what it stands for, it stands for racism. Let me use an analogy. The swastika. Okay, the swastika did exist long before Adolf Hitler, goes back 5,000 years. There's variations of it in Hinduism, but we all know what the swastika stands for. It stands for bigotry, hatred, and
all
anti-Semitism.
the discussion about the flag, nobody's talking about the root cause of the problem here, which there are deranged people in the country, and what people need to be focused on, if you see something, say something. No one is focusing on the cause of people who are mentally unstable. That is the cause of outraged people being killed.
Look,
it's not a flag. It's deranged people.
I will agree with you that this killer is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, okay?
Correct.
Most killers are.
Correct.
But he stated very clearly what his motives were.
And his family
He's a racist.
knew it.
Okay, so
his family knew
Here's
it.
the point.
His friends knew it.
Point.
Nobody said anything. If they would have stood up and said something, they could have apprehended him before he did anything.
What they did was give him a gun.
I have problems with what both of you are saying. I assume Tom means that if anybody knew of the plot, then they should be arrested because they were withholding information that could have saved lives. But if someone's a racist, that doesn't mean that there are blacks who are racist. There are everybody.
No, it's not the racism.
Right.
No,
So you meant
it's a part that
and what Jane's problem here is, so
I don't have a problem.
Well, I mean, because he draped himself in the flag, so that means the flag has to go bye-bye because one guy did this with the flag drape?
No, because it was the battle flag of Robert E. Lee.
Right.
It's the symbol of the side that lost.
We're coming back. More of the panel. Don't go away.
They lost.
All right, back with the Malzberg panel, Jane Velez-Mitchell and Tom Borelli. And let's move on to the second aspect real quick of this whole shooting, the politicizing of it, in my view, and that is guns. Senators Toomey, Republican, and Manchin, Democrat, are now trying to bring up once again background checks and get that passed through the Congress. But I got to tell you, Jane, Toomey was just on CNN, and he was asked by Jake Tapper, which one of the recent, mass shootings would background checks have stopped? And he said, well, he said, good point, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, maybe Virginia Tech, if, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, this is just, there are 20,000 gun laws now. So this is just politicizing and exploitation from people who want to take our guns away, could take them away from law-abiding citizens.
Look, there are, I don't know how many gun laws, but there are as many guns as there are people in the United States. And we're having more mass shootings than other countries that have gun control laws. The problem with the whole gun issue is that the founding fathers did not anticipate wackadoodles, 21-year-olds who are totally out of their gourd, with semi-automatic weapons. They didn't know from AK-47s. Okay, so we've always had crazy people, but we live in a society where crazy people now have the capacity like that to become mass killers. And frankly, I don't want to be one of their victims, and I don't want any of my relatives to be one of their victims.
Well, Tom, of course, mass shootings are down very much over the years. Thank God they don't happen often at all. And, you know, in this country, we have something called the Second Amendment, which other countries that Obama and everybody else and Jane are comparing us to don't.
Right. You know, the problem here is, you know, politicians engage in all these feel-good exercises, try to get themselves in front of a camera, trying to say the extra background checks are going to save lives, and they're the champions and saviors of the world. We all know it's nonsense. The problem are deranged people. We need more watch on people who have mental illness and what to do with them. That's the problem.
And the drugs,
right.
All these mass killers have one thing in common: drugs. And by the way, I get a little nervous also because I think that Obama's goal is, if you've ever been to a shrink, ever been to a therapist,
they're doing that to the veterans, right?
Oh my God!
They're doing that with the veterans.
I think that's where the left wants to go.
Let me give you a hint. The Second Amendment was created to allow local militias to protect themselves should a totalitarian government come along.
Not according to the Supreme Court.
Guess what? When a totalitarian government comes along, they're going to use this. They're going to use all the information they collected on us.
Gun control hasn't helped people in Chicago. That much I'll tell you.
Jane, I'll tell you what. You said you were afraid, or you and your friends, of if you're afraid of criminals, your best protection is to have a legally owned gun. And wherever the people carry around this country, crime goes down.
I am totally in favor of police. I love police. I love alarm systems. Yeah. But I have seen many cases, and statistics will tell you, many cases where people who have guns in their house, the criminal takes the gun and shoots them with it.
Okay, well, you know what? I'll take that risk.
Chance. Thank you.
I mean, you could have an alarm go off and you could call the cops, but if the guy's in your house and he's about to rape you, God forbid, good luck waiting for the cops to come. Not that the cops aren't vigilant, but you know, you're at their mercy when they can get there. All right, I don't know how much time we have. Okay, good. Okay, so Barack Obama comes up with this this great policy now. Guess what? It had been against the law if you, God forbid, if there was a hostage taken, if your relative was being held hostage by a terrorist group, you couldn't negotiate with that terrorist group to pay ransom. In Europe, the governments pay ransom. So there are more European people taken hostages and being held by these terrorist groups around the world because they know that the government will pay them. We did not do that. So what does Barack Obama do? Hey, guess what, families? You can now negotiate with terrorists to pay ransom to terrorist groups if your loved one is kidnapped. So guess what's going to happen? Americans overseas and maybe even at home are going to be kidnapped and held for ransom. Tom?
Yeah, well, you know, again, and he's creating a new bureaucracy to do this.
Yes.
Maybe we can get the head of the VA.
So he can now meet with ISIS like he sits with Iran.
Exactly. You know, again, well, it all started with the Bergdahl situation where he traded
one
deserter for 5 Taliban terrorists. So that set the precedent. Now we're moving on.
Jane?
I happen to agree that it's a bad idea. I don't think you should incentivize hostage taking, and in many cases, or at least in some cases, I don't want to exaggerate, in some cases that I've read about, families have gotten together a lot of money, in one case $250,000, and gave it, and they didn't get the hostage they want. So I think it's a bad idea also to legitimize ISIS, for example.
Well, I am now retiring because Jane and I agree. So, see, all right, Jane Velez-Mitchell and Tom Borelli, thank you both very much. Noah Rothman is next, folks.